Yo, welcome to today's video on engineering ethics. And today we are going to be looking into the engineering ethical principles and also taking a look at some case studies in this field. There is no way we'll be looking into engineering ethics without having an understanding of what is ethical or what are some of the ethical principles or what do we consider ethical or what is ethics. So there is a good understanding of having a good understanding of what ethics means will give us a better understanding of how it is being used in the field of engineering. You know, when we mention the word ethics in some fields or the field at which it's coined from, that is in the field of philosophy, it is called moral philosophy. So under philosophy, it is called moral philosophy. So another name for ethics, it can also be known as moral philosophy. And in a simple way, it's just a way that deals with moral principles and values. And when we're talking about moral principles and values, it explores what is right and wrong. As simple as that, just what is right and what is wrong. So, what do we consider right and what do we consider wrong is what ethics is all about. Furthermore, we can also say it's all about the good and the bad. Ability to know is it good, is it bad? The ability of us to be able to differentiate what is good or bad, what is right or wrong, is what we call ethics, and how people should act in various situations when they are able to determine when a particular situation is good or when it is bad. Because without ethics in most of the fields of not just in engineering, in other fields, it's very important for us to have a good understanding of what the ethical principles in those fields. And that is what helps us to get the best out of the practices in all these fields. So ethics is not just in the field of engineering. We have what we call, we have the legal ethics, we have medical ethics, we have bioethics, we have business ethics, different fields. Almost every field has some ethical principles or ethical conducts that helps to regulate um, the practices in these fields. So before we can look into how ethics fits into engineering, we also need to understand that it's a document which we call the Code of Ethics. That document is more like a formal document. I think almost every organization have that's what we call the Code of Ethics. It's a formal document that outlines an organization's or profession's value and principle of conduct, guiding members in making ethical decisions. So whenever there is a need for an ethical principle to be introduced at any point within the organization, then the code of ethics, that is the formal document, is being referred to help to guide that organization in the kind of decisions they need to make. We're going to be looking at some of the scenarios in the later part of this video. So the idea of going into engineering ethics or having ethics being introduced in the field of engineering is very important because of the different practices in the field. We know engineers are into the construction of high maintenance structures such as maybe bridges, cars, airplanes. You know, they build products such as cell phones, home appliances, adverbs. So they are more like they are into technical um, things of technical technologies or building new technologies. And some of these technologies or some of those structures really needs to go through a lot of ethical procedures and ethical guidelines to be sure that it is done in the best way possible, because in most cases some engineers might decide to use inferior products in order to save cost, and in the process of building maybe bridges, houses, or any form of technology in which any slight in the midst of any slight weakness or failure of that particular technology, it can lead to a drastic effect, or maybe leads to the loss of lives and properties, or for money. But in this case, it is not just something that needs to be taken with so much levity in the field of engineering. Let's say, for example, An engineer wants to build a 5 or 10 story buildings, but due to the fact that the engineer wants to save costs in the in the process of that, decides to buy inferior materials such as maybe the sand or the cement that will be used in the construction, and the foundation of that building was not laid properly. If that happens, we know that whatever that will be standing on that, or the if the foundation is faulty, whatever building that will be erected on that foundation is at risk. And as a result of that failure, or as a result of that negligence on the part of the or the greediness on the part of the engineer, it might lead to the loss of lives if that building is finally erected and people decide to stay or move into that kind of building at any chance of failure, or as a result of the weakness in the building structure, can lead to loss of lives and also properties in that regard. So the idea of ethics in engineering is very important. So using the example of an apartment or a building is just one of many examples. We have the aircraft, we have airplane, um, we also have the bridges, like the bridge. These are various aspects in engineering. We have, just like we have the civil engineering, electrical engineering, and other fields like that. So it is quite important for ethical principles to be followed and a code of ethics to be drawn by any company that is involved in engineering works. And that is also why the field of ethics, or the engineering ethics as a topic or as an aspect, needs to be thoroughly dealt with. This is develop process such as the process of to convert salt water into fresh water, or the process to recycle bottles. These processes change how we live and how we accomplish. So the idea of engineering ethics is beyond just something we take as a pinch of salt. It's an aspect that needs to be well looked into and well implemented by any engineering company. Now we looking into Ocean Gate Titan scenario in 2023. This is a perfect example that helps us to have a better understanding on engineering ethics. So what happened to the Ocean Gate Titan? Now, Ocean Gate Titan had a chance to descend 3,800 meters, that is about, I think, about 12,500 feet to the Atlantic depths to visit the wreck of the Titanic. But in 2023, a dive by this company sub went tragically wrong. That is, the vessel suffered a catastrophic failure as it neared the seafloor and killing all 5 people on board. Now the question is, what happened? According to Donald Kerman, an engineer with the National Transportation Safety Board, he testifies that the carbon fiber hull had many imperfections. Now that is the word, had many imperfections, including wrinkles, pores, and voids that potentially weaken the structure. That is where engineering ethics comes into play. Before this sub or this ocean gate sub can be allowed to go dive deep into the ocean, there are a lot of processes, there is a lot of checks, tests that needs to be done to be sure that it is perfectly safe to dive that deep into the ocean. But as a result of maybe the organization or the company trying to save cost and trying to use the best possible materials in order to achieve the most or utmost profit from the dives, that decided to use some equipment without thorough test that makes it perfectly safe to go that deep into the ocean. And this is where engineering ethics comes into play. This is where the ethical part of any engineering equipment or any engineering structure comes into play. And we could see that at the end of the day, as a result of that failure, it led to the loss of lives of everyone on board in that sub. So products and processes have consequences for society. We know if the bridge has an inadequate support, it will fail. It might not fail the first 2 weeks, 1 month, 6 months, 1 year, but eventually at the point when it weakens, it will fail. If the gas tank is positioned too close to the bumper, it might explode from a small accident. And that is why we can see in the construction of vehicles over the years, we can see improvement in the field, in the construction of vehicles, in the positioning of vehicles. There is a movement from the use um of fuel in vehicles to a case where we have to make use of uh, you have the electric vehicles. There was a time when gas was used or was experimented to as a means to run vehicles. But as a result of some of those failures, as a result of some of these consequences, because any slight bump or any slight hit on that can lead to an accident. So these are some of the reasons, or these are some of the processes that engineers had to go through to make sure that it is ethically safe for people to use. Now, it says if a medical instrument isn't accurate, improper doses of medication can be given. So, to the slightest of things, when they are not done right, then it can lead to a greater effect that leads to the loss of lives. If the process for refining gas produce too much toxins, it harms the local community. So, ethics is not just something that we just, okay, it's just ethics, it's just a matter of right or wrong. We ask ourselves at the end of this day that if whatever thing we produce, is it ethically right or is it wrong? It might sound like just a two option answer, like it's either it is right or wrong, but it goes beyond that. And that is where the code of conduct or ethical code of conduct is being drawn. That document is being drawn by any company to make sure that the right processes and procedures that makes sure that their products or whatever equipment they are producing are ethically being followed, that they are done in the right way before it is being released into the society. These decisions made by engineers usually have serious consequences to people, and that is one of the biggest challenge when it comes to engineers. Someone can say, okay, why are we talking about it is just engineering, but we also have it in the field of science, in the field of medicine. Yeah, but because this video is focusing on the field of engineering, it is just for us to know that any decision that is made by an engineer has serious consequences on the people, most especially the users or the stakeholders that are involved in the use of that produce or that development or that technology. And often to multitudes of people, ethics and ethical reasoning guides decision making. So what it does is that when we're making something, at the back of the mind of that engineer, there has to be that ethics and the ethical reasoning guide to help know that whatever I'm doing, is it ethically right? Does it abide by does it take into consideration the safety of the people or the stakeholders of those who are going to be making use of that particular product? Having those thoughts in mind helps to produce or helps to guide the engineer to know that, to help them in guiding them in their decision making towards the product. So we have the ethical principles in engineering. We have about six, if not more, ethical principles in the field of engineering. So we're going to be looking into some of these principles one after the other. One of the most important part, or one of the principles, is to keep the public safe and sound. The priority of every engineer is to keep people safe and healthy no matter what. In whatever product it is, any equipment or any technology that they are coming or they are building, the first thing or the first principle they need to have in mind is the ability to keep the public safe and sound. Now let's imagine your family, or if your family is boarding up an airplane that isn't safe. Just imagine that horrifying thought of maybe in the process of boarding the plane, there is an announcement that maybe one of the wings or something within uh, the the engines the engine of that particular airplane is not working well, or it has a little bit of a defect. You know, it's quite horrifying when we think about it, right? And this is just an extreme case, but a should airplane design could lead to a catastrophe, and we know that it doesn't end well in most cases. From what we have seen over the years, whenever that happens, maybe it leads to lots of life, the loss of men of lives at the end of the day. So the one of the most important principles in engineering ethics is the ability to keep the public safe and sound, and that is very important. Another principle is the ability to provide the best quality work at all times. This is not a matter of yes, we've done well in we've had about maybe 20 productions so far and they are quite okay. Maybe the 21st production could still be a bit substandard. No, no, no. Ability of an engineer to be able to provide their best quality works at all times. In some other fields, you can maneuver your way around and produce substandard products, and the effects might not be drastic compared to in the field of engineering, where the best quality work needs to be produced at all times, not just sometimes, but at all times. We can see we're all humans, right? Even engineer gets tired or sleep up sometimes. We know that, but to truly excel, tackle every project as if it's your big break. That is one thing that engineers need to have at the back of your mind. That every project is should be like the breaking point of their lives. It should be it should be their make or break. That is putting the same art and soul into the small stuff as the same way that particular engineer will put into the big stuff. So there is nothing like there is a project. This project is small, this project is big. The same way an engineer puts his heart to a big project should be the same way they do into a small project. And that is one also another important ethical principle in the field of engineering. The third principle here talks about provide services in the area of your expertise. This is very important. I've heard the saying, a jack of all trades, master of none. But in some countries or in some places, we know people try to make themselves jacks of all trade. It can work in some fields, no doubt about that. But most especially in the field of engineering, it is very difficult to do that. Now, the final 1% is the hardest part of engineering design. When we're talking about the final 1%, that's when your unique skills shine and you can't just reuse old ideas. Now, you might be a whiz in your own field, no doubt about that, but that doesn't make you the jack of all trade when it comes to engineering product or engineering setup or in the production of engineering a technology in the field of engineering. Now, a structural engineer might not ace the last 1% of another domain. That is, the most important thing is for you to focus on what you know best and do it the best way possible. As a structural engineer cannot do the job of a transportation engineer. A transportation engineer cannot do the work or the job of an electrical engineer. Because we're being referred all as engineers does not mean that the same person who is in the field of transportation can do a job in the field of electrical engineering. You can have an idea. There is no problem in having an idea. But when it comes to making products that's that the lives of people depends on, it is best that it is done by those who are experts in that field. And that is why this principle is very important, that is providing services in the area that you best fit, that you know best. I am a transportation engineer does not mean that I have to go into another field in order to boss around and share my idea. You can share your ideas, but it has to be in the area of your expertise. Now, the fourth principle is be honest and truthful. It sounds like, okay, yeah, be honest and truthful. Yes, we know that. Everyone knows that. Even in our daily encounters, we know we need to be honest and truthful. But when it comes to the field of engineering, it is way beyond that. Let's take this example. Two engineers are working on a prototype. The job of the first engineer is to develop the prototype, while the responsibility of the second engineer is to inspect the prototype and pass it to be sure if it is ready for use or if it is qualified, or if they to carry out some relevant tests on the prototype to be sure that yes, it meets the required standard. Engineer A has done his job coming up with a prototype, designing the prototype, and doing his work in the best way possible, and passes it to engineer B to inspect the prototype. But as a result of the laziness on the part of of engineer B, he failed to do that, and being unreliable as a person, and the set time in which he was meant to do that passed. So what engineer B did was just to pass the prototype and declare it approved, that it's all okay. We can see that if this prototype is being sent into the for manufacturing, or probably sent out there for use, and it fails, that means the part in which engineer B ought to have been able to pinpoint any weakness in that prototype might have failed because of what? Lack of being honest or being truthful. Engineer B could have just told me, engineer, hey, I'm sorry, I've been busy, I have a lot of things going on. I was not able to test or carry out the check on the prototype. That could have, given them enough time to, okay, let's look into it again, or maybe probably we can send it to another engineer for test, or to carry out the inspection on that prototype, rather than being dishonest and being untruthful about it and passing it for production. So we can do this on a small scale, just like what we have here, just within two engineers. The dishonesty between two engineers, but it is another ball game if it has to do with to the whole world. We have seen some technology companies who are out there, make who has they made some equipment, or maybe cell phones or whatever it is, and they're selling it out there and being untruthful and dishonest about maybe the functions or whether the warranty or anything that could affect the lives of the users of those mobile phones or equipment or products. So it is quite important that engineers, or it's quite important for companies to take this into consideration and be honest and truthful about their products. But we know that this is one of the challenges we have in our current world, where people are dishonest, companies are dishonest or untruthful about their products. The fifth principle is always have your clients and employers back. We have seen over the years, we've seen some employees, they snitch on their employers, or probably they sell confidential or informations to other close companies. This is not ethical. This isn't ethical. So this is focusing on employees who are working for an employer. That is, when you're contracted with someone, you have to make sure that you've got their back by delivering top-notch services and steering them away from poor choices. That is a job, because that is what you're paid for. Some employees, or some employees come out to say, I wasn't paid well, maybe what I was paid wasn't enough. The fact that you have agreed to work with the company and you are a rightful member of that company, you are morally obligated to give your best to that company as far as you have been contracted with them. But sadly, some rogue engineers out there steal proprietary information from their companies, either to sell it or use it to launch their own businesses. And these engineers usually get caught or end up behind bars. So, but at the end of the day, even when some of them go scot free or they are not caught, we know that it is ethically wrong, because the idea of this topic is to have a good understanding of what is right and what is wrong. And what engineering ethics is all about, or what we're talking about, is engineers having it at the back of your mind: what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is bad. I know we have been able to look into honesty and truthfulness, but even when it sounds similar to this, but it's quite different, and that is ability to avoid deceptiveness. Deceptiveness is more like a deceit. Now let's think about this. If a surgeon lies about their experience, and you go under the knife, and you know definitely well, as a patient, you are in a world of pains, It's the same thing with engineering. Clients choose engineers and firms based on their experience, trusting you get the job done, right? And in most cases, we know that some engineers can be very deceptive, most especially when they are submitting their bid for a particular project. When an engineer or an engineering company knows that they have only 3 years experience on the job, so you see some of them, they manufacture experience, they manufacture years of experience on their portfolios and make it sound like they've handled businesses or they have handled projects that the company is actually looking into. This is what we call deceptiveness, and it is not ethical. So, engineering ethics and this principle is very important because there is a need to avoid deceptiveness. If you have 5 years of experience and the call for the project or the it's requiring 10 years of experience, even if you want to submit your proposal for the project, you still need to include it that you have 5 years experience on the job or as a company. If the job will be considered, if you are going to be considered for the job, you will based on your truthfulness without being deceptive by presenting false document that shows that you have handled some project in which you have not handled, or you've spent a certain number of years in the field or on the job in which you haven't. So it's not just about honesty, but deceptive behavior is the gateway drug to violating all other ethical principles in engineering. And if you can't be trusted to tell the truth, then what else can you be trusted with? And that is one of the most important thing, ability to avoid deceptiveness. This is another principle. So let's look into this case study. Now, based on this case study, we have looking into Wayne Davidson. So let's Wayne Davidson, a software engineer in the aerospace division, is tasked with building prototypes for Operation Safe Skies. The project was very crucial in the aviation industry because it was expected to assist the Federal Aviation Agency (FAA). Occidental Engineering needed, that is the name of the company, Occidental Engineering needed to win the contract and ended up bidding very low amounts that would not be enough to produce quality work as expected. We can see for one of the flaws, they submitted a low amount so they can be considered or favored for the job with the hope that when they get the job, then they will produce low quality, give a low quality work or produce low quality work. The project was underfunded and understaffed to meet the budget. Occidental Engineering was awarded the contract and began implementing the project immediately. The project team worked all day long to ensure they meet FAA guidelines to avoid huge penalties and losing project tenders in the future. When the prototype was completed, it was taken to Wayne for testing. That is, Wayne's job is to test. Or we can say Wayne Davidson, who is a software engineer here. Wayne went ahead with all tests and proved the system was working accordingly, but it discovered one major problem associated with safety of the Operation Sky Safe Skies project. Wayne realized the system lost track whenever there were a lot of aircraft in the sky. The forgotten aircraft would cruise without any trace, and that may lead to collision and avoidance of other safety. The question is, what should Wayne do? Even when the prototype or the project is very impressive, even with a low budget and even when they're understaffed, the possibility of knowing that when it is in the sky, it can lose track. That is, they lose track of it. And as a result of that, we know in the aerospace there is a way whereby they have to track, you can't lose track of any airplane in the air. And as a result of that, if that happens, when other airplanes can't see any other airplanes in the sky, it can lead to any form of collision, and that cannot be that is not safe enough. And not only that, it's going to lead to loss of lives. So in this case, we have what should Wayne do? Now, based on the response, what was it that Wayne did? Wayne took the report to the project boss. They were Shepherded, that's her name. He claimed that the project was not safe and the team should consider designing new software for the safety of the travelers. Deborah realized the deadline for submission of the test was near and could not risk failing to deliver the project on time. She commanded Wayne to sign the system pass test unless he wanted to lose his job. So that means his boss is threatening to fire him if he does not pass the system. That is, the system is quite okay. She also claimed that she knew people at FAA and was sure the project would eventually pass. Wayne released the result and test to FAA, but later took an earlier retirement because he thought the action was unethical. There is a lot of flaws in this case study, starting with the fact that the project was underfunded, understaffed due to the due to the proposal the company submitted to, that is Occidental Engineering submitted to claim that particular project. Now the project has been given to the company, but the problem now is they have designed a very good software, but the problem is it loses track when it's in the air, and that can't happen. So when being the software manager, noticing these flaws, knows that the only thing that they can do is to design a new one. But because the head, that is Deborah, knows that number one, we don't have time to develop a new one, and maybe also considering the cost of the amount of money they've spent in developing the previous one, they felt like, okay, no, we don't need that. It's gonna be safe. We don't need to worry much about that. And not only that, I have people in the FAA, that is the body that the documents are meant to be submitted to. So he said, no, no, don't worry. I think I got this covered. I know people there. That is nepotism. That is, since she feels she knows people there, they will just get the whole thing passed. And Wayne feels that he can't do that. And as a result of that, Wayne feels like the best thing to do, which is ethically right, is to submit the actual test or whatever that he has come up with, or the and showing the weaknesses in the system or in the software, submitted it to the FAA, and took an earlier retirement, because at the end of the day he knows that Deborah was going to fire him. And we can say that what Wayne did here is ethically right, even when it could lead to the loss of his job. But maybe he couldn't bring himself to terms knowing that it can lead to, it might not happen immediately when the software is being launched, but at a later time, it might lead to a loss of life, or it might lead to any form of accident, and he can't bring himself to terms with that. So that is based on this case study. Then we also have another case study here, in which you can look into during your free time, and you can give your response to the case study in the comment section. And here we have the case with Han, so you can read through, then you can share your opinion on this particular case. So I will see you in the next video. Thank you.